Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to look at Bazzite, a Linux distro designed for gaming. And whilst today I'm no longer heavily into gaming myself, I do like to check out popular Linux distros. What's more, because the requirements of gaming and content creation aren't that different, they both, for example, require a properly configured graphics card, I'm particularly interested to see how Bazzite works out not just for gaming but also other applications. So let's go and take a closer look. Right, here we are on the Bazzite website where the focus on gaming is immediately explicit. Indeed, if we scroll down like this, we can see that Steam is pre-installed, and for non-Steam games, Lutris is pre-installed, which offers compatibility layers and emulators for all kinds of games. However, perhaps even more importantly for both gaming and wider use, we see that, unlike some Linux distros, Bazzite focuses on hardware compatibility straight out of the box. This includes pre-installed NVIDIA GPU drivers with games controller and other drivers also included. And so, Bazzite offers the kind of Linux experience that many beginners seek. Bazzite is based on the Fedora Linux distro and is available with either a GNOME or a KDE Plasma desktop. Specifically, Bazzite with a GNOME desktop is based on Fedora Silverblue, whilst Bazzite with a KDE Plasma desktop is based on Fedora Kininite. And to explain what this means and why it's important, both Silverblue and Kininite are atomic Fedora variants. This means that they're very stable because they're based on a bootable container image with a read-only file system. In turn, this means that updates are applied at the image level rather than changing individual drivers and other files. Scrolling back up, we can indeed see that because Bazzite is image-based, after every update, the previous version of the operating system is retained. So, if an update causes any problems, you can roll back by selecting the previous image in the grub boot menu when you start your computer. 10 different Bazzite installation images are available, which we can see on this FAQ page. This lists the different ISO files, offering either a KDE Plasma or a GNOME desktop with computers that have different GPUs. And you can also select if you want a traditional desktop or a Bazzite deck image. And if you opt for one of the deck images, Bazzite will boot directly into Steam gaming mode, which is similar to the interface on a Steam Deck handheld computer. So let's go back to the main page and click on Download, where first we have to select what hardware we're going to be using, and in this video we're going to install Bazzite on my i5-10400 test rig, which has got an NVIDIA GT 1030 graphics card. So for this we're going to select Desktop PC, and then under older legacy GPUs, NVIDIA GT 9 or 10 series. And we'll just scroll down a bit as well because we need a bit more space. And it is informing us here we can't use Steam gaming mode on this hardware, which is not for me a problem because it's not what I want it to do. So let's just now choose our desktop environment, which is going to be KDE Plasma, which is generally easier for Windows users than GNOME. And having noted that there are options for existing Bazzite users and existing Fedora Atomic users, we'll go back to the screen that landed us on, which is that, and click on Download Bazzite NVIDIA. And this is quite a large file, as we can see up here. It's just under 8 GB in size, so let's use the magic of filmmaking to speed on through. And there we are, it's finished, and we now need to flash our ISO file to a USB drive, which needs to be at least 16 GB in size. And I thought it would be nice today to do this in Windows 10, where we're going to use Balena Etcher, but you could use Rufus or other imaging software if you wish. So, with our USB drive already selected, let's select our ISO file. There we go. And click on Flash and let Windows know it's OK. And as we speed on through, I'll give the usual warning that writing an ISO file to a USB drive will delete everything from the USB drive. Right, here we are booting from our USB drive on my i5-10400 test system. And we'll let the default option in the grub boot menu take us through, and as it does, I'd note that Bazzite requires 8 GB of RAM and at least 50 GB of free drive space. And also note that the installation SSD or hard drive must have been initialized with the GPT partition style. Anyway, here we are in Bazzite running from the USB drive, which can be used for testing the system out if you wish, and I'd always recommend testing the basic hardware on your computer running from a USB drive before you do an install. Check that things like Wi-Fi, a laptop, trackpad, etc. are all working, and if everything's okay, then do your install. Which of course is what we're going to do here. I'm going to go straight to install on the test system. Here we go. Very exciting. I do like all the information displayed here on the desktop, and oh look, we've now entered the installer, where I'll first select my language and then confirm the date and time, which is correct up here. It's wrong down here, but it's correct up there, so we will go on next. And then we need to select exactly how we're going to do our install. Here I'm going to use the entire disk. It has actually been initialized to factory state. It doesn't contain Windows as it says up here, but never mind, we're going to use the entire disk. And I'm not going to select disk encryption for this test system, but if you were using a laptop, something like that, I would recommend encrypting the disk. Next, we need to set up a local user account. After which, we just need to review our install, which all looks okay, so I'll just click to say I understand that all existing data will be erased, and we'll click on Erase Disk and Install. And there we go. That was totally painless. I'm extremely impressed so far. So let's now conjure up the magic of filmmaking to speed on through. And as we can see, Bazzite has added its own secure boot key. I've actually got secure boot turned off on this system, so I've no idea why Bazzite felt it appropriate to add anything to my firmware without asking, but there we go. And indeed, here we are, installation has been a success. So let's exit to live desktop and straight away reboot the computer. And I'll remove the USB drive, so the system will boot as normal, and for some reason, even though secure boot is turned off, Bazzite has brought up the MOK or Machine Owner Keys utility, maybe because I guess it installed a key without asking. But regardless, I'll just select Continue Boot, after which we'll speed on through the first boot preparations. And here we are arrived on the desktop, where I'll click to begin setup. We've already got our language. Why we have to do this again, I've no idea, but there we go. I'll put the keyboard layout to UK. I think we will have a dark theme. I'm happy with the hostname Bazzite. My time zone is correct. And oh look, the device is now ready. So let's log in. And here we are on the Bazzite desktop. And I really like the way that the desktop wallpaper is now a fully rendered image when it was a wireframe in the live image. That's a really nice touch. Anyway, it's now telling us that Steam is opening for the first time. This may take a few minutes, so I'll just click on OK. And there's nothing else fundamental to do in terms of the setup process, although the help pages on the Bazzite website do recommend going into settings to select the display scaling factors you most prefer. And having noted that, we can see that Steam has finished installing itself. You can sign in with a Steam account. For now, I'm going to leave that and go and change my scaling settings, and I'll come back to you after this into title. As we've just seen, Bazzite installation is very straightforward. And having tested things out, I'm pleased to report that everything does work out of the box and that Bazzite is very fast and responsive. Here on our standard KDE Plasma desktop, we have by default a bottom panel, a bottom taskbar, and a left-hand menu. And here, if we go into System Settings, we find all of the settings we have in a KDE Plasma desktop, loads and loads of them. These are what I've used to make a few scaling changes. And here, if we go down to the bottom and click on About this system, we can see we're running KDE Plasma 665 as well as Linux kernel 709. And the system has clearly also identified our discrete GT1030 graphics card. Talking of which, if we go back to the menu and search for NVIDIA, we find that the NVIDIA X Server Settings app is present and the correct proprietary NVIDIA driver has been installed for this system. So Bazzite is delivering on its promises. Having just looked at the menu, let's go through it more logically to see what is pre-installed. And there isn't a great deal. Under development, not a lot there. We have gaming stuff, we'll come back to that. Under graphics, we just have a couple of viewers. Under internet, we've got the Firefox web browser, KDE Connect, and again, things related to gaming. Under multimedia, we have a player. Under Office, just a viewer. LibreOffice is not pre-installed. And then under System, we have the usual range of system apps, nothing particularly surprising here. And similarly, we have a standard kind of range of utilities. Although it is interesting to see that down at the base of the menu, we have Waydroid for running Android apps in Linux. To install more applications, two options are available. The first of which is the Bazzite portal, which can be used to install what Bazzite describes as a small subset of custom scripts. And we can see these looking down here, lots and lots of different things available, including a script for installing the DaVinci Resolve video editor. That is very good to see, but lots of things available here. We've also got the opportunity to install media apps. I presume most of these are browser shortcuts to make things like Disney Plus available in your Steam library. We also have various management utilities. We can manually force an update here and manage a range of other functionality, including things like configuring the Grub boot menu. We have system tweaks. Again, quite a comprehensive range of things available. I can't possibly go through all of these, but it's very good to see they sort of thought about what you might need and included something to do it. And then finally, we have troubleshooting on the end, including a link to the Bazzite Discord. However, to install most applications, we have the Bazaar App Store, which installs Linux programs packaged as Flatpaks. Given that Bazzite is an atomic Linux distro, Flatpak is used as it's a containerized packaging format. And indeed, all apps need installing in a container of some kind. Via the Bazaar App Store, we can install a very wide range of Linux applications. But before we try this, I thought we'd turn to gaming. So let's first of all run up Lutris, one of the two main gaming platforms available here in Bazzite. And there is so much functionality here for running all kinds of different games. I'm not even going to attempt to go through everything here, but it's good to see it all in place. And then secondly, most importantly, we have Steam. Let's run up Steam, to which I have now logged in. And oh look, it wants us to Slay the Spire 2. Very exciting. And if we look across to our library, you can see I've added Super Tux to install a bit later on. That also looks to be very exciting. This all said, as it's a very long time since I was a serious video gamer, I'll say no more about what's on offer here, save that everything does seem to work, and that I've only ever heard positive feedback on Bazzite from those who game in Linux. Whilst Bazzite is primarily intended for gaming, it's nevertheless a performance-optimized Linux distro that's very easy to set up and which can certainly be used for other computing activities. To demonstrate, I've installed the DaVinci Resolve video editor, which is usually not that straightforward in a Linux distro. But here, I just placed a copy of DaVinci Resolve downloaded from the Blackmagic Design website in the Downloads folder, launched the Bazzite portal and ran the DaVinci Resolve install script. This just requires you to select the zip file and then automatically installs DaVinci Resolve in a DaVinci box container. So this was the easiest installation of DaVinci Resolve I've ever done in a Linux distro. Because the program is installed in a container, it doesn't appear in the menu, but the installation script does provide a desktop icon. So let's run it up. Here we go, and I installed DaVinci Resolve 18 because I happen to have the zip file lying around, and let's just bring in a file. I've been messing around to check things work, which clearly they do. Let's go back to the start. This is a Explaining Computers video edited in DaVinci Resolve, and as we can see, everything's working absolutely fine. I've also installed other productivity applications via the Bazzite App Store, and specifically FogPanther, LibreOffice, Blender, Kdenlive, and GIMP. And all I had to do here was to search for them and click on Get. So if we go down to the menu, you'll see things have been added. Under Graphics, we now have, for example, Blender. Let's run up Blender. Always good to run up Blender. We've got a test file there as well. There we are. This is a model of a graphics card, and clearly there's no problems with the NVIDIA drivers and things here. Everything's working absolutely fine, which is always good to see. Shall we save it? I don't think we will. We've also got installed here a trial of FogPanther, the new Linux-only Photoshop alternative I talked about in a recent video, which is very exciting. And I also installed there in Graphics, GIMP, the GNU image manipulation program. Always got to try out GIMP, works absolutely fine. And also here now we've got Kdenlive. Yes, I've installed 2 video editors. This one needs a little bit of work, I think, in terms of scaling on this machine, but it is actually working. And of course, I have installed LibreOffice. Gotta have LibreOffice. We've got to be able to go into LibreOffice Writer and write hello and select it and make it very large indeed, which, as some of you know, is the law. Now, having demonstrated that Bazzite is a very capable general Linux distro for non-gaming use, one little quirk is worth noting. This concerns the use of removable drives, as Bazzite strongly favours the ext4 or BTRFS file systems for any external drives used to play games. So, if we plug in an external SSD formatted as exFAT or NTFS, there we go, you will see the drive is not mounted automatically. We have to click on Mount and Open, which is absolutely fine. But we also get this message about using an unsupported file system, which may be a little alarming. However, using exFAT and NTFS drives for normal data storage purposes does work just fine. And indeed, exFAT support is critical for reading files from memory cards or SSDs used in cameras. So it's perfectly okay to mount an NTFS or exFAT drive and click on I understand. But I just thought I'd alert you to the messages that come up to protect gamers from using file systems that may cause program execution issues. Right, just before we wrap, I thought I'd return to the subject of updates. And guess what? Since I recorded the last segment, the DaVinci Resolve icon has sorted itself out. Anyway, what I intended to talk about here is that if you install a desktop image of Bazzite like we have, updates happen automatically and are checked for on a daily basis. As I explained earlier, because Bazzite is an atomic distro, the entire base image of the operating system is replaced in one go, and this means that a reboot is always required for an update to be applied. Because Bazzite is based on Fedora, it also always updates to the most leading edge Linux technology. So, for example, Bazzite will on average be running a more recent version of the Linux kernel than more conservative distros like Ubuntu or Linux Mint. Also, as noted earlier, if an update causes a problem, it's easy to roll back to a previous base operating system image. One way to do this is via the grub boot menu. So, to demonstrate, let's reboot. And here on the grub menu, 2 different images are available. 0, which is the current and most recent deployment, and 1, which is the previous one. Normally, by default, the first option is automatically selected. But if when the grub menu appears, you cursor down to number 1 and select that, you can boot the previous image. As Bazzite now boots the previous image, note that this rollback will only impact the base operating system and not user data and applications. And this is because all applications are installed in isolated Flatpak or other containers. So let's log in. And here we are back again. And if we look in the menu, we can hopefully see under graphics the applications I installed after the last system update are still there. They are. We can still go into, for example, Frog Panther like that. And DaVinci Resolve is still also installed in its isolated container. Having the grub boot menu option to boot from a previous system image is very useful if you encounter any update issues, as it should get you up and running to hopefully update to the latest working image or to investigate matters further. Bazzite is an operating system I've had a lot of requests to review. And I'm very pleased I've now taken a look at it because it's a fantastic Linux distro and not just for gaming. In particular, it's very fast and responsive, and I'm extremely impressed with the out-of-box configuration and the automated DaVinci Resolve install. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.